All right, let's get started. Back into Philippians chapter 4. We are actually in week 9 of this look into these passages in the middle of Philippians. In Philippians 4, one of the things that we know as the backdrop of what's going on is that Paul is addressing a disagreement, and he never even describes the severity of it or the nature of it. All that we know is that there was a disagreement. Looked like it originated between a couple of women. But so what we're watching again from last week was that chapter 4 doesn't fit real well if you don't understand all the background of chapter 3 about being in him, about knowing him, all those things that we talked about that I'm not going to go through again this morning. But he now steps in saying, because of those things, even in this disagreement, you can be of the same mind. And he encourages those around to help. So verse 3 is where we're going to pick up. Philippians 4, verse 3. He's encouraging the Philippian church to encourage these two women. Verse 3, and I entreat thee also, true yokefellow, help these women which labored with me in the gospel, with Cleopas also, and with other my fellow laborers whose names are in the book of life. Verse 4 of this chapter is one of the best known and easily quoted verses by Christians around the world. So he encourages their help with these women, and then he steps into this very, very commonly known, well-quoted verse. There are many songs that use these words in the lyrics and in the title, and it was simple and it was concise. Because in verse 4, Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always, or at all times, and again I say, rejoice. The oddest thing about this verse is not found in the content of the verse. It's found in the context in which it was used. I mean, if Paul is dealing with a conflict or a quarrel or something being upset, this is the backdrop of this letter that he's dealing with. And if we had been in the middle of a psalm, if we had been in the middle of rejoicing, then we could see how Paul could drop in this phrase, rejoice in the Lord at all times, always, and again I say rejoice. So the unusual nature of the verse, again, isn't in the content of the verse, it's in the context in which it's used. Paul has just talked about the division that is in the local body, and that has come at the hands of these two women. Again, he's just encouraged them to help the women who have labored with him so fully and so completely. So the greater question here is simply, is there some profound meaning in these words held in this context? And the answer is yes, as in any scripture. So we ask ourselves, stop just a minute, which we typically don't do here, and ask ourselves, what is the uniqueness here? What is Paul really saying? Is it just stop, encourage, help? What's really going on? So we need to slow down just a second. And as a matter of fact, we're going to slow down so much that we're not even going to get to verse 5 this morning. That we're going to slow down enough that verse 4 is the entire conversation this morning. The first reality that we have to know is that this short phrase comes in the flow of words, and if we're really going to find the uniqueness, we have to keep it in this flow of words. We have to hold it as a sentence and a statement that Paul was making that would flow from one word, one phrase into the next, one sentence into the next. Because what typically happens is we talk about, we reach and get that verse, verse 4, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice, and we write songs. And we put it in lyrics, and we say it to one another. But the uniqueness beyond what's obvious is truly the fact that it's held in this context. So we need to understand it in the flow of words. So this is really what Paul is saying, to keep this in the flow. And I've used some more common words than the King James uses. So this is what Paul is saying. I ask of each of you who are bound to me in friendship and in faith, help those who are companions and whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. Rejoice in the Lord always. Rejoice in the Lord at all times. And again, I say rejoice. So Paul is giving a simple instruction about walking with the Lord in this remarkable journey. This emphasis is a major theme of this letter. If you read Philippians, you can't miss it. The word joy is a persistent word, and it was consistently given in light of the difficult circumstances that this particular church faced. It's found in Philippians 1:4, 1:18, 1:25, chapter 2, verse 2, verse 16, verse 17, verse 18, verse 28. It's found in chapter 3, verse 1, verse 3, and found in chapter 4, verse 1. The word joy or the emphasis on rejoicing. So as I mentioned previously, it's not given for us to know the cause of the difficulty in the church. We don't know the nature of the schism that is there. We don't know what the disagreement is in the church at Philippi. Jan said it was probably about dancing. It's always about dancing. So in the absence of a specific cause, I can learn the universal truth. Think about this, because if it was about one particular type of disagreement, then the answer would have been a specific answer. But because we don't know, we learn something that becomes a universal truth. And this is the universal truth. Rejoicing is a cure for disagreement. This is what Paul is telling us. He is reminding us that if you're in the middle of a disagreement, if you are anticipating a disagreement, the way he drops this in, holding it in context, says, if you are doing this, then I want you to do something. I want you to encourage these people that have helped me so much. So we understand encouragement is in the recipe, but it's also saying specifically now, between two people. He's not saying just to the people who are going to provide the help in the conflict to rejoice. He's telling the two or three that are caught in the conflict to rejoice. Because rejoicing is an antidote, a cure for disagreements, and rejoicing will always change the condition or the atmosphere that will make an offense very, very difficult. I've got a few illustrations of how I can describe this, but each one of them have to point back to the same story because I really only know one. I know, I'll give this quick example. I have been encouraged to watch The Chosen, and if you haven't watched it, it's very uniquely done. There's it's a series, very short segments, but Jan and I were up a couple of nights ago, and it had just been a particularly difficult day, not between us, but just life in general. Tired at the end of the day, just so at about 9:30 or 10 o'clock, I said, I'd already watched the first one. I said, Jan, do you want to watch it? So we watched the first one, we watched the second one, got into the third one. And even in that refocusing, I don't know about for Jan, but I know for me that it truly changed the mind and the emotions with which I went to bed. To change the place where my mind was, to change the atmosphere where my heart was, and truly the difference that made. Now, when we recognize, if we think about it for just a second, it's very hard to be offended in rejoicing. It's very difficult to maintain it. This would be a strange what if. What if two people standing in conflict refused to talk about the conflict, but only stood there face to face, rejoicing the Lord for who the Lord is, and rejoicing and thanking God for who the other person is? I wonder what that would look like. I wonder what would happen in the environment, what would happen in the conflict if instead of the harsh words, instead of the silence and the walking away, if the words of rejoicing began. I wonder how long you could maintain it. I wonder how long, and my mind goes back to Nehemiah, and I think it's chapter 8. They had just completed a remarkable work. They had rebuilt the walls in the streets of Jerusalem, rebuilt the gates, and it was time to praise God. It was time to just thank him for what he had done, how he'd sustained them, how he protected them, everything. And so somebody, and I can't remember the story well enough to call the name, but somebody finds a copy of the law of Moses. And they begin to read. They get up on this pulpit and they begin to read. And the people begin to weep. They begin, because their hearts are broken for all that they've done. Their hearts are broken for all the past, all the rebellion, all the anger, all the bitterness toward one another, all the harshness. They're weeping before God because of it. And Nehemiah and a few of the other leaders stand up and say, stop it. Stop weeping. This is not a time of weeping. He says, I want you to go in your homes. I want you to get food. I want you to prepare. I want you to invite everybody, because this is the time of rejoicing. This is the time when we're thanking God. We're not sitting here remorseful for what has been. I mean, this is one of those clear pictures where in these verses, God sliced off that former thing so that they could rejoice in the moment for the beauty of what God was doing. It's amazing how the answer to the weeping, the answer to the shame, the answer to the regret, the answer to the blame that had been in their story was removed at a word and became a celebration with rejoicing, because rejoicing is still such a powerful part of a cure for disagreements. The things that Moses did in bitterness, he threw in this tree. In hard times, he struck the rock. In war times, he held the sword of prayer. And you realize what answers we've been given. Paul says, encourage the women, but for you personally, rejoice. And rejoice in the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord always. People who are truly happy. I want to pick on somebody here, and it's probably it, and I will be careful, but I'm gonna pick on somebody here. I know just from the story, from many things, Lorinda has gone through some hard things, but she is one of the happiest people I know. I mean, there's a presence of happiness and joy around her, and it's really hard to rattle. It's really hard to shake. In staff meetings, she would come in and she would share a piece of information about her health or about something that was going on in her life, but it was simple, it was factual, and it was always replaced with that smile. But I also would say about Lorinda, she is tremendously difficult to offend. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I've watched her, even in the last month, I've watched her. That's what makes the grace in her what it is because there's a quality or an attribute or a characteristic about her that makes it at the end of the day tremendously difficult for her to be offended. So I won't say any more about you, Lorinda, but it's remarkable. It is that smile that we see. There is a key ingredient to happy. Those people have truly learned. I want you to connect this dot. Elaine sent me a note and said before I ever said Lorinda's name, she had Lorinda on her mind. That's who I was going to say. There's a key ingredient to being happy. Now I'm really talking happy. I'm not talking joyful. I'm talking happy. There's a key ingredient to being happy, and this is what it is. Those people who are happy have truly learned how to take captive their thoughts and their imaginations. You are not going to live happily if your mind and your heart are vulnerable to every up and down. You're not going to live happy if when something happens, you can't take it captive quickly and put it back in its proper place. Put it back not in the place of right and wrong, but put it back in the place of truth. That person hurt my feelings. Yeah, but the truth is, instead of being angry about it, that person hurt me. But the reality is that person who hurt me is hurt themselves. That's truth. They're struggling themselves. They're frustrated themselves. They're angry themselves. See, that's moving us from the moment to truth. And somebody who's happy can do that quickly, can move that quickly from one category to the other. So happy is, if you're going to be, those scriptures in Corinthians are powerful about the weapons are mighty through God and taking captive thoughts and imaginations. And it's somebody says, how do we do that? How do we actually take a thought captive? And I don't have a great way of describing it, but I'll use the same illustration I typically use. If my mind is in a rut because even though I've been delivered, I'm not poor anymore. That's been picked up and removed from me. I'm not weak anymore. I'm not this or that anymore. I've truly been delivered. But we've talked about this a lot, that when I lift it out of there, it's like lifting a tree out of its place. The roots are still there. Well, those roots have to die off. And one of the ways they die off is when I realize I'm going down the path of this root, and I realize, this is old. This is the old thought. This is the old emotion that I'm going through, and I make a right turn into truth, that I've taken a thought captive. I didn't let it run. I didn't let it go its normal path. Somebody says something that offends or hurts or stings, and the old person of who we are begins down this path, and the Holy Spirit quickens and say, no, take it captive, make a right turn, go into truth, recognize that person themselves is hurt. They need to be prayed for. They need to be encouraged themselves. They need to be told that they're good. They need to be told that they're important. They need to be recognized. Don't run them down. That's the old path. That's taking a thought captive. And it is amazing, functionally, factually, practically, the joy that comes when you make a right-hand turn. When you actually can see what's going on and make that right-hand turn, it will bring a peace to you, it will bring a joy to you, and it will bring rejoicing to you. Not to go down the old path that's going to lead to discouragement, more frustration, and bitterness, because God has removed the tree. We have to let the roots die off. Those people who truly are happy, their minds are free from former things. You're not going to be happy. I just can tell you for sure, you're never going to be truly happy if your mind dwells in former things. Yeah, good memories, but good memories really won't make you happy. They might bring you peace. They might bring you some joy, but they're probably, those old memories are not going to make you happy in a way that would sustain. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you dwell on bad memories, things that have happened, I can assure you there will be very, very little happiness in your life. The faster you can cut former things from you, yesterday, 2 weeks, 10 minutes ago, the faster you can cut former things from you so that your mind can be free, the happier you will be. It's a real simple equation. People who are truly happy have freed their minds, their hearts from former things, and they don't get hung up on the imagination of things to come. That's where I stumble. How many of you from time to time have to fight back a concern of what it would be like if you were to get the coronavirus? See, that's projecting. That is letting our imaginations come up with conclusions because we don't know what the conclusions are. And I'm not talking about serious consideration of things to make sure that you're ready if something were to happen. That's a different story. But to begin, the imagination, and see, again, this is my struggle, being able to catch those imaginations. What would happen what happened if this happened? If this happened? If this happened? Man, that will get ahead of steam in a hurry, and we'll run down these paths, and we'll live in the insecurity of our imaginations, not facts. Most of us live somewhat suppressed or even anxious about things we imagine, but that will never occur. There's a famous quote about that. Is it Mark Twain?
What did he say?
About most of our problems, or we worry about most of our problems that will never come about, or something like that.
Probably was him.
Yeah. We're not going to be happy if we can't control those imaginations, hearing a story, filling in blanks, not truth, just filling in blanks. I shared this a couple of times with people that I've met with. But if I'm sitting here, and this is going to be true of happy people as well. If I'm sitting here and I'm wearing a 50-pound backpack of valuable things to me, it may not be valuable to anybody else, but they're valuable to me. I've got this in there, and I've got this in there, and I've got it in this backpack, and I'm sitting here in this chair. I imagine I would be able to hang on to those things for the entirety of this teaching, and probably, if I needed to, several hours. I could probably sit here with that 50 pounds on my back in this chair, uncomfortable, but I could sit here a while. But the minute that I stand up, go down the front steps, and start walking down the street, those valuable things are going to become less valuable. You see, it's the forward motion that causes us to almost naturally drop off former things. I can try to hang on to them, but there's a point in my journey. This is what Paul's talking about. He's talking about a walk here. He's talking about a walk with him. Any forward motion in our life, which is the way we're designed. We talk about it all the time. We talk about this being a journey, walking in the Spirit. We talk about this move all the time. But when we're hanging on to former things, one of the things we need to check and look at is, am I moving forward? Do I wake up in anticipation of the day? Are there people expecting to see me? Are there things that need to be done? Are there places where I need to go? Are there conversations that need to be held? Is my mind fixed on future things? Because if not, I will, by the very nature of sitting still, revisit former things over and over. Now, my suspicion is every one of you know what this is like. Every one of you know that there's places in our life where we have we're having a difficult time right now because of the pandemic. We're having a hard time moving forward. I'm not sure I can stand any more remodeling, because when you can't move forward, what you do is you remodel your house. At least at our house we do. It's like you just start another project, and it's like.
What do you mean we?
Jen said, "What do you mean we?" Never mind. I start another project. She does too, but they're smaller, baby blankets or whatever they happen to be. But when we move forward, we will reshape the very nature of our hearts. We will reshape what our mind focuses on and where our hearts are. This is just simple but truthful reality. Anytime we get stuck, the tendency is to revisit our present condition over and over and over, and it becomes overwhelming. Charles Spurgeon wrote this in one of his messages, that joy is the cure for all discord. Joy is the remedy for all discord. Rejoicing in the Lord at all times. That's another, just like, again, based on context. Rejoice in the Lord always. It must be from more than a sunny disposition and a determined optimism. You're not going to be able to hang on to rejoicing if it's just coming out of a person who has a sunny disposition or someone who has a very determined optimism. It has to be beyond a positive attitude. And Paul makes that clear. Our rejoicing comes from the simple reality that we know that God is in charge, and that anything in my story can be brought to him because he is in charge. If I didn't know where to go, if I didn't know what to do, then I'm left in a place of frustration. But God says, I am in charge. You can bring anything to me. You can come to me as children. But still the key, and I have this conversation so often with so many, still the key is when we go to our Father and he gives us the answer, we still must receive it, or it will still be ineffective. Most of us know He's going to tell us in these verses, rejoice in the Lord always. That's beyond a sunny disposition, because some people just don't have a sunny disposition. Some people don't have this determined optimism. So Paul makes it clear our rejoicing comes from a simple reality that we know somebody to whom we can go. I know a mental and emotional and spiritual doctor that I can visit about my ailment. When we remember the reciprocal nature of God, that he's not going to expect anything from me that he doesn't first give to me. Get that in mind. That again, if he wants me to adore him, then I have to know he adores me. If he's going to tell me that he wants me to rejoice in the Lord, what is the reciprocal side of that? He must, before that, do what? He must rejoice in me. Wow. And that's not based on performance. He rejoices in us as his children, or we would never be able to rejoice in him. He is delighted with us so that we can be delighted in him. Man, this is powerful when you recognize this reciprocal nature, this truth about God. He's never going to ask us, expect anything of us that he hasn't first given to us. So if he's going to ask us to rejoice always, it's because he's always already given the rejoicing that comes from him about us. He's rejoicing over you. He's delighting in you. Okay, but we got about 11 minutes and we need to do a reality check. Because most people hear this and will scripturally acknowledge it and say, but I just can't live that way. I just can't do it. I just can't do it. So here's a reality check. The most people maybe not say, but live, rejoice in the Lord always. Yeah, right. If they knew, if they understood, if they saw, if they were where I am, if they felt what I felt, yeah, right. What an instruction. Rejoice in the Lord always. Wouldn't that be great? But never even imagining it to be real or realized. Everyone wants joy in life. Everyone wants these words that are on the surface simple. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Everybody wants that. But when you look beneath the surface, these few words create many questions. Is it really possible to rejoice always? Is this a goal he's giving us but that we can't reach? What does this actually mean? Am I supposed to go around with a perpetual smile on my face? Is it a sin for me to feel sad or depressed? Am I supposed to deny pain or sorrow? And how can you command a feeling anyway? And the words of bubbly, incurable optimist are what? What are these words? That's a reality check, because most of us read it, look at it as a goal, but never imagine living in that place. It's too hard. Life's too hard. There's too much trouble. There's too much news. There's just too many challenges, too many restrictions. I can't do it. I can't rejoice in the Lord always. So where's the critical truth that makes this come into focus? We got to get there. We got to get to this critical truth. It's found in 3 words, and I want y'all to really get this. It's found in 3 words that we read over because we think we get it. We don't even stop long enough to ask, is there something else there? 3 words. And here are the 3 words in the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord. Here's the problem. We have consistently looked at this as the Lord being the external focus of our rejoicing. Somebody parks a new car in my driveway. I can rejoice in the car, where the car is the object of my rejoicing. I'm happy because of that. I'm happy because I can see something outside of me that was given to me. Rejoice in the Lord. He's wonderful. He's delightful. He can do all these things. Rejoice in the Lord. But we've made this, just by the quick reading, we've made him the external focus of our rejoicing. As much as that is true, nothing wrong with that. I'm not criticizing that we rejoice in him as the external object of our rejoicing. As much as this is true, the external view is not the full truth. If I consider him as the external object only, my view can become cloudy, because if I'm standing there looking at the car, what can happen? Someone can come and up on my porch and stand in front of me with a problem. And then my view is obscured of the car. Something can happen and pass between me and that car. And I lose my focus. I lose the view of it because something becomes much more prominent in my face than the car is sitting out in the driveway. That makes sense? So if it's only an external something else can cause my view. It's like my mind goes to Peter. He's looking at Jesus, but the water obstructed his view. He looked at something else, and there was an outcome to it. Again, they are the storm that Peter was in when he lost sight of Jesus. So the reality here is that rejoicing in the Lord always is only accomplished, some key words here, it's only accomplished in the supernatural. It's only accomplished in the supernatural when we leave the flesh, leave our physical body, leave our mind and our emotions and all the challenges that are in the flesh, and we enter fully into the Spirit. Because don't you see, that's what the scripture says. Rejoice in the Lord. It would be very, very difficult to disrupt my view of the car if I was sitting in the car, where it's not an external something I'm looking at, it's an internal something I'm living in. So when all these verses we hear about in him we live, in the Lord, this positional place that we hold, when Jesus tells us, he is in me and I am in him. And Jesus tells us this is such the key that our rejoicing, to rejoice always in all things, requires us to be functioning in the Spirit. Because in the Spirit, I know power and authority. In the Spirit, I know sonship. In the Spirit, I know what it means to be a joint heir. In the Lord, I know what it means to be loved beyond measure, peace that passes understanding. I know joy unspeakable and full of glory, but I can't know those things until I am rejoicing in the Lord. Not as an external focus, but I'm rejoicing in the Lord because I'm found in the Lord, inside him. Pick me up, put me in him, and if I am, then I'm in the Spirit. And I will be able to rejoice because there will be nothing greater. I'll be able to quickly recall, greater is he that is in me than he that's in the world. In the Spirit, I will recall this love of God. Behold, what manner of love the Father's bestowed upon us so we can be called the children of God. I will recall this peace that passes understanding. I will recall because I'm in the Spirit. You're not going to block my view of the car because I'm sitting in the car. I'm experiencing the car. I'm resting in the car. You're not going to be able to block my view. I am in it. So if we don't make this shift from the Lord being our external view that causes us to rejoice, we will never fully understand how to rejoice in the Lord always, because we'll have to find some way to keep things from blocking our view, getting between me and Him, causing me to lose my focus. In the Spirit, in the Lord, I can rejoice, and I can rejoice always. That is my lens. That will be our lens as we view life when we rejoice in the Lord. That was a revelation to me. Read past it. Rejoice in the Lord always. Look at what He's doing. Look at what He's done. He's our Savior. Look, He's died on the cross. Look at all that He's done. Stand back and admire Him and rejoice. And some problem comes jogging in front. And all of a sudden, everything I was thinking that was good and holy is like jogged in front of me, and my mind is taken away. My heart's taken away. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I'm tired, whatever it happens to be. Like, how do we change that? But we don't just make Him the external reality of our joy. We make Him the internal reality of where we live, in His presence, in Him, not just sitting next to Him. It is me. I'm going to say this backwards, but I'll correct it. It's me entering into His body, but it's also His body, His Spirit entering into me. We can rejoice. It's not designed. It's the same teaching as be ye therefore perfect. Is that a goal? No. Be ye perfect, even as the Father in heaven is perfect. How is that perfection attained? Oh, He comes to live in me. I can be perfect because He's not asking me to perform. He's asking me to die so that He can come live and do perfect things through me. He wants us to rejoice in the Lord always. Oh, it's not so because He's an external reality to us. It's because it's the place from which I live. I live in Him. In Him I live. I move. I have my being. In Him, whoa, this is powerful. There's no condemnation. Is that a cause of rejoicing? Never condemned. I hope this connects, because we're kind of woefully short of rejoicing in many ways right now, because, man, something huge has marched in front of this external God that we're trying to rejoice. I'm standing on the porch, and the cars out there on the driveway, and a train of thousands of cars comes whizzing through my front yard and completely obstructs the view of that in which I'm trying to rejoice. That's what the pandemic has done. It's caused so many to lose sight of the goodness of God because they've looked at God as this external reality, but something has just taken all their attention, all their mind, all their heart. And God is saying, you want to change that? Just go get in the car. And you can't be separated from it. Sit there, and it won't matter where the train goes.